What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Real Talk NFT, where we talk all things Web3. Super excited to have on Matthew Liu here on today, co-founder of Origins Protocol, also one of the driving forces behind many products at YouTube. Before we jump into things, firstly, I want to thank you for changing my family's life. My brother-in-law, who I will name drop, he's built his career on YouTube. He's Hugo Schneider. Also, myself, last year I divested my own YouTube channel. So it was really meaningful to me and my family. I know you're one of the early pioneers there. And it's such a powerful, meaningful platform that, must have been tough to top. So, tell us what you've been doing since then that kind of led you to develop Origin Protocol.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say that's totally undeserved, right? YouTube was a phenomenal startup that required, the very, very hard work of, the two founders, Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, who still continue to mentor me a bit today, but also just like a
Nice.
much larger team. So, everyone kind of deserves the credit there, but I'm glad you had such a wonderful experience being a creator on YouTube. And you're right. It took a really, really long time to find something that was equally as exciting and potentially transformative as my experience at YouTube. I was really spoiled, right? I joined YouTube right out of grad school, was the earliest employee there for a while, was one of the earliest product managers, and really got to see how this transformative technology, as well as changing social paradigms, right? This concept of user-generated content and everyone can be a creator has really, really changed the world. And now YouTube is obviously a hugely massive business, right? Billions and billions of dollars of advertising revenue every year. But I think even more so is like the impact that it's had, right? Billions of people use YouTube. It teaches them how to do things. It entertains them. It gives creators an outlet to, create their work and monetize their work. It just creates a really great platform for a bunch of people all over the world to connect in a different way. And so that was like an amazingly wonderful experience. And then I spent probably, 10 years or so after YouTube trying to find something that would kind of captivate my attention in the same way, right? And so I worked at a number of other startups, started a couple of my own businesses. They ended up being more, I would say, like lifestyle businesses, right? So generating cash flow, but not necessarily transforming technology. And it was really when I went all in with blockchain and cryptocurrencies. I was like, hey, this is the next thing, right? This is going to empower people in, again, a hugely transformative way. It's not just, a very niche thing, even though it might start very niche, but at some point, this is going to be something that's used by billions of people and transform the way that people interact with finance and also even creators, right, with NFTs and stuff now, and where that will go. And also just empower freedom of speech and like expression. And there's just so much that can be done with these decentralized technologies. And again, coupled with the technologies are also the changing social paradigms, right? How do you make things a little bit more open, more permissionless, right? Break away from kind of the established order and, create these new systems that can kind of live on their own forever on the blockchain. So that's kind of like the overall story arc. I was very fortunate to almost like accidentally get into the Ethereum community. 2014, I saw someone that was like smarter than myself say, hey, like there's this new thing that is launching. It might be the next Bitcoin. It's called Ethereum. I was like, don't know anything about it, but sure, I'm going to throw some money in it, right? So that was when Ethereum was doing its ICO, and I think ETH was like 25 cents an ETH or something. Didn't throw that much money into it. I wish I did a much larger chunk, but obviously Ethereum has evolved quite a bit since those very early days. And as it started evolving and I saw the developer community and some of the technology advancements, that's when in 2016, I decided to go all in, right? And so we sold off one of our businesses. We shut down another one. Well, we kept it running, but we stopped working on it. And then Josh, my co-founder, and I just went all in, and we started first just like trading cryptocurrencies, right? And understanding that mentality, built our own portfolio management tools, some algorithmic trading, bots, etc. And then it's like, you know what, like, let's take the next step, right? We want to actually have much more impact in this space and build something people will use. And so that was the genesis of Origin.
Yeah. Wow. You definitely touched on a few pieces there that we'll dive deeper into. Origin, I think a lot of people like myself are new to it. And you chose kind of I wouldn't say interesting route, but maybe you explain it to me. It's a layer 2, correct? It's on Ethereum. It's built on Ethereum.
It's not a layer two, right?
Oh, it's
It's a
not.
set of
Okay.
protocols that are built on Ethereum, but it's not a layer two like scaling
Oh,
solution.
okay.
Yeah, at least not yet. But
Yeah, when I first saw the DeFi kind of headline and
yeah,
NFT, I kind of took that as, hey, they're like, like a polygon of sorts of having your own native token. How does that mix, and how does that maybe explain to us how that
yeah,
works?
I can walk you through how all that works, right?
Yeah.
So we started Origin in 2017, right? And truth be told, our original vision, was way too early for its time, right?
Hmm.
And so we were trying to build a marketplace for everything, allow people to buy and sell anything on chain. NFTs weren't really a thing then. If they were, I
Hmm.
think that would have been a much better timing for our vision. So as a result, we ended up having to explore and pivot a bit throughout the years, right? And so there was that big crypto bear market in 2018 and
Oh
2019 where
yeah.
a lot of people thought crypto was dead, but we're like, we're going to keep building. We're going to try to find out what can actually be useful to the world, right? And then we actually started running some of these experiments in DeFi and NFTs right when kind of like activity was picking up for both of them, right?
Hmm.
And we started with OUSD on the DeFi side, and then the original NFT product, which now has become Origin Story. Those were kind of like early during those two waves, right?
Yeah.
And fortunately for us, 2021, we realized like both businesses were working, right? So with Origin Story, the NFT platform, we were working with top celebrities and influencers. Paris Hilton
Right.
joined as an advisor and investor. We were working with all these music producers. We were working with NFT artists. We even did a collaboration with Inspiration 4 and SpaceX, their first
Hmm.
civilian space flight to do NFTs there. And then on the DeFi
Nice.
side, our OUSD product was serving thousands of users. Total AUM was around $300 million, and so we kind of decided that we were going to actually build this multiple business lines under the Origin umbrella. And so now we have the NFT business, right, that has its token OGN, and then we have the DeFi business that has its governance and value accrual token OGV. And
Hmm.
it's still like one company, but we run pretty autonomously. We have a fully remote and distributed team. The majority of our code is open source. We have contributors from all around the world, and so we're really trying to build up this like Origin ecosystem. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, right? Like we have to make sure our current business lines are highly successful in the next few years. But ultimately, 5 years from now, in a ideal scenario, we would almost have like a suite of different products that we built that have tremendous impact on users' lives, right? So almost like Alphabet with Google and
Hmm.
et cetera, or like a Meta with its different business units. Obviously, we're much smaller, we're much earlier in the process. We haven't proven ourselves to the same levels of these kind of like Web2 winners,
Right.
right? But we do want to figure out the right products, the right use cases, and deliver real value. I think that's something that we're really focused on, like long-term utility and impact, hoping to get to hundreds of millions of users at some point.
Yeah, I saw that. That's kind of one of the missions is to onboard a lot of people. And
Yeah,
when I saw DeFi, I'm like, that kind of is like a different language than the average layperson. So I
yeah,
was curious to see if you have found a implementation, between the
yeah,
influencers that you mentioned with the DeFi. So that was my first thought. I was like, oh wow, they found a very interesting way to kind of initiate and activate DeFi with NFTs. Let me dive into this. But it's kind of siloed for now, right?
yeah,
So that's pretty cool. And you have these different business segments and you're going to expand upon that. Okay, got it.
yeah, yeah. I will say that, like, today what we focus on is like, how do we make this like easier for
Right.
people, right? So our DeFi products are definitely, I would say, simpler to use and maybe less degen, as people would say
Hmm.
in crypto, right? It's not about trying to make the most money in the shortest amount of time possible
Sure.
and then go from like opportunity to opportunity with these opportunities disappearing. It's much more around safety, security, ease of use, sustainability, right?
Yeah.
So our two products, OUSD and OETH, they're essentially really easy to use products, right? OETH actually just launched 2 days ago. It's a brand
Hmm.
new product.
Oh wow.
And the idea is like earn yield as fast as you can on Ethereum, but in a safe and secure way, right? So let's say I send you 1,000 OETH today. at the end of the year, you might have 1,100 OETH, and you wouldn't have to do anything, right? The OETH just sits in your wallet, it's self-custodial, but it's earning a yield, currently at 12% a year right now, based on what the underlying protocol does, right? And so, unlike in other DeFi protocols where you have to potentially, stake or unstake, you might have to like manage your LP position, or you might have to move from chain to chain to get the yields. We're taking a path like, hey, this is a dead simple product. With OETH, you earn ETH as fast as you can, don't have to do anything. OUSD, it's USD denominated, so it's like stables, right? So it's almost like having a high yield savings account on chain where you just set and forget and let it grow for you. So that's kind of where we tried to make DeFi as simple as possible. And then on the NFT side, it's like, how do we create the right creator tools to enable all these different NFT creators and projects, et cetera, to be successful in building up their own ecosystems. And so this part, definitely aligns a lot with some of my early experience at YouTube and working with creators there and helping build some of the tool sets so that they could build their businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new concept that I believe everyone, not only creators, influencers, just this whole notion of being your own bank and to your point, making it simple and having these safeguards in place is something that the previous generation didn't have to deal with, right? Even when you're creating YouTube, there wasn't this, owning your own bank kind of ethos and being your own boss and, democratizing or decentralizing everything. I'm sorry. So, security is definitely top of mind for myself. I work in Silicon Valley, like strategic management for high profile domain name portfolios for like Fortune 500 companies. So security is something that not many companies think about, let alone individuals. And just to segue a tiny bit from NFTs, although this is an NFT podcast, I'm sure you heard the news, Ledger released a recovery seed process. What's your thoughts on that? Because, you're dealing with DeFi and NFT assets. What's your thoughts on the recovery seed process? I just wanted your general thought because this news just came out like a day ago.
Yeah, it's a huge controversy right now, right? And I think there's two camps really, right? And I'm still trying to form, a strong opinion as to where I think the truth is, and I do think the truth is somewhere in the middle, right?
Okay.
So the big like outcry from the community is like, wait a minute, like Ledger has a backdoor to be able to kind of like see your seed phrases, right? It's not just like completely secure on the device, but then at the same time, it kind of is, right? This is what it's like been from the very beginning, right? Ledger has had to been able to upgrade their firmware so that you can continue to support the chains that you're using on Ledger devices as those chains get upgraded, right? So when Ethereum went from proof of work to proof of stake, right, there were necessary like software upgrades that kind of had the same type of security considerations that were announced recently with this social recovery thing, right? And so had this software not been built this way and this firmware and the hardware been built this way, when Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake, like I believe Ledger would not work anymore, right? Or, with the launch of a new chain, right? Let's say in the early days, you had Ledger for like Bitcoin and Ethereum, but you didn't for Avalanche, right? Avalanche is a slightly newer chain, right? Or you mentioned Polygon earlier, right? And so without those like firmware upgrade capabilities, those ledgers would not be compatible with these chains, right? And you would have to like essentially get new ledgers every single time that a chain upgrades. And so I think there's kind of like almost like a wake up call where people didn't realize that this was necessary in order for the user experience to actually have a ledger that's compatible with upgrades and new chains. And so I think there's a huge surprise here. I do think there is some risk, right? Because it does mean that there is, non-trivial possibility that this could happen where an attacker might be able to get their seed phrases, but I do think it's a very low probability, right? And so I guess the jury's kind of out. My advice would be if you're truly worried about a lot of these things, if you have a lot of funds, put them in like a multi-sig, right? And then that requires multiple signers. Even if it's, you have multiple devices that are signing before stuff goes out, right? So that's one solution. Another is to diversify, right? So I have, many ledgers for different purposes, but might as well get some Trezors, right? Might as well get some other alternatives so that like you kind of like diversify that risk a little bit. And I do think that a lot of this is a terrible communication job by Ledger, right, as to what is
Mm.
actually happening. And so I think a lot of people are confused about it and definitely freaking out. And so, yeah, I have to study a little bit more. My personal plan doesn't change that much, right? Like I have a lot of, I split funds into a lot of different places
Sure.
so that there is one given compromise. It doesn't completely ruin me. And then the majority of my like most important funds, right, are locked behind multi-sigs, like Gnosis safes,
Yeah.
right? And so transferring those funds require multiple signings from multiple devices. And so in the event that there's a compromise of one device, at least the others have not been, right? And so that's another added layer, right, of redundancy for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, best practices are not well practiced at all within the
Yeah,
industry, especially for the average person. So thank you for
yeah,
your input on that. It was just so fresh that I had to ask, and I
yeah,
know
of
we kind of
course.
skewed from topic. So being more of an NFT focused channel that we are,
Sure.
the NFT side, the new creator influencer economy. I mean, you've seen this firsthand with YouTube. I mean, you
Yeah.
were there from the get go. It's only going to continue. It's only going to proliferate, and more services will be are catered towards influencers and creators nowadays. And you've created and you worked with some of the biggest NFT drops to date with 3Loud, like you mentioned, Paris Hilton. What's some
Yeah.
of the biggest feedback from the bespoke marketplaces that you've gotten from either creators or people utilizing it?
Yeah, so there's like I think a multitude of things that's going on right now, right? One, I will say that like NFTs are in their infancy, right?
Yeah.
As excited as we are today, I think we're going to be way more excited 10 years from now when NFTs like wrap all these different types of assets, right? And right now it's
Hmm.
mostly like digital art or these like, PFP avatar projects. And really people are buying and selling NFTs with like kind of like an expectation of making money, right?
Mm.
But I think later on in the cycle, we're going to see NFTs with all this different type of utility, right? So NFTs will represent in-game items. It'll represent real-world assets. It'll represent tickets and access passes. It
Yeah.
might represent almost like identity attestations, right? Like an NFT that can show like where you went to school or what job you worked at, or some third party verifies your credit score, right? And so all these different things will happen with NFTs that make them more useful and more ubiquitous, but people might not actually realize they're NFTs, right? So I think that's where we're going in the long term future. I think in the short term, some of the feedback that we're seeing in the market is that there are different parts of the funnel that tooling and infrastructure needs to be built for, right? So there's like
Hmm.
primary mints, right? How do I actually issue my NFTs? Then there's things like secondary sales, right? Marketplaces. Then there's like engagement tools, and how do I re-engage my community, keep them excited? How do I do follow-on things, right? How do I incentivize them, et cetera? And so I think there's going to be like a full set of products and tools by ourselves, but also by other people to kind of fill these different gaps, right? Specifically to marketplaces, which is kind of where we're pushing right now, these creator-focused, brand-focused marketplaces. You can think of it as almost like an Amazon versus Shopify analogy, right?
Hmm.
So in the Web2 world, e-commerce, there's Amazon, right? It's an aggregator. It aggregates a bunch of sellers and then sells to consumers. And those sellers, like, they don't really have that much control, right? They put their like product listing data, but it's not really a unique experience. They don't really have a direct relationship with those customers. That's an aggregator model. Then you have the Shopify model, which is what's more of like a platform model, right? Shopify is a
Hmm.
technology platform that allows merchants to create their own storefronts, to maintain direct relationships with their customers, to customize their stores. They have a developer API and app platform that allows these stores to become more customized, have special features, have different like pricing models, adding different widgets and et cetera, right? And so these are two very different paradigms, and I think
Yeah.
both are going to end up existing in the world of NFTs, right? And so the aggregator model, that's where we see companies like OpenSea and Blur, and that's
Hmm.
where most of the trading activity is right now, right? Because those companies are, number one, quite successful. They figured out their mechanics, but also the NFTs that they're selling are, I would say they're pretty vanilla, right? They have different artwork and traits and things like that, but they're actually pretty similar in what they're supposed to do, right? They're just kind of like these visual representations, and people are investing in them, right?
Hmm.
Now, we think the future holds a world where the Amazon model and the Shopify model can coexist just like it does in the Web2 world, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why do you need kind of the Shopify model for NFTs? Well, number one, creators want more control, right? So they want to be able to control things like branding, right? They want to make sure that there aren't scams, right? People aren't faking collections, right? And they want to make sure that they can enforce creator royalties or other specific features related to their NFTs. And the aggregators are ignoring that, right? Like Blur and OpenSea, it's like, hey, royalties are optional at 0.5% now, right? And so it's kind of anti-creator to a certain extent. And they also treat all those NFTs the same. Whereas in a Shopify model, right, using our technology or some other players' technology, you can display your NFTs in a different way, right? And our NFT should be displayed differently than a ticket NFT in the future, right? We recently did a deal with Roofstock, and they're selling homes, like actual physical homes that are tied to NFTs. And when you buy the NFT, then you're essentially buying a house, right? That should be a very, very different experience, right, than buying a PFP on OpenSea, right? And so there's going to be this necessary, like almost like enhanced functionality for specific use cases and verticals. And, in the real estate case, like they require buyers and sellers to be approved offline in an offline legal process, right? And so that's something OpenSea will never add to their feature set, right? Or you can imagine in the future, a marketplace that's embedded into like a AAA game, right? Well, the game is going to want like an SDK where that marketplace can be launched within the game and have great look and feel and branding and be cohesive with the game. They would prefer that over their users leaving the game and going to Blur to buy like an in-game sword and then bringing that back into the game, right? And so because of, I think, these new utility cases that we're going to see, again, whether that's game or real-world assets like real estate or ticketing or access passes or some of the stuff around like digital identities, these use cases are going to require unique user experiences that can be built on a common technology platform, just like Shopify is a common technology platform, right? But then the add-ons, the bells and whistles, the customizations and enhancements, that's going to be necessary to really fulfill those use cases.
Absolutely. There's so much to unpack there. So much great stuff for community members and collectors like myself, and also for creators. And just taking Roofstock as example, I mean, they are, I haven't looked into it deeply, but most, real estate transactions happening through the blockchain is under the form of LLC. But, not diving too deep, are we waiting for just overall like general regulation here before we can really get into kind of like the intricacies of it? Because I can see, not only through real estate, but, having DeFi or even NFTs within the real estate example really help individuals like myself in terms of investing and having an open marketplace. I mean, is every industry different? Like what? Because there's so much that can be implemented, right? I'm sure you see this across so many different verticals. What's kind of holding us back, or is it nothing's holding us back? We just kind of have to circumvent the law right now. Well, I hope the law's not listening into this podcast, but
No, I think there's quite a few challenges before we get to this future state of the world, right? None of them are unsolvable. They're just going to require hard work, time, and effort, right? So part of it is, regulatory or legal related, depending on, the asset, right? Like when you buy and sell a home, there's like federal laws and local laws that are different from region to region, right? And so that's one potential piece of it. If you're going to be like using NFTs to represent like commodities or even in a future world like equities or something like that, there's definitely some regulatory considerations there. Now, there are other categories where regulatory shouldn't really come into play, right? Let's say like gaming, or ticketing, things like that. But therein, I think it's more of like a technology innovation as well as user adoption issue, right? NFTs are still pretty niche, right? In the grand scheme of things, even though there was like this huge NFT spring in 2021 where everyone was learning about them. But the number of like active wallets trading NFTs is still rather small, right? And the power users number are kind of like in the hundreds, and then like the overall users, hundreds of thousands, et cetera. But I think we need adoption of crypto in general, of Web3 wallets, and of NFTs to go a little bit broader before some of those use cases really make sense, right? Because the market size needs to be big enough if you're building like an NFT ticketing platform, right? Or an NFT platform for real estate, et cetera. And so I think that is going to take a little bit of time. Now, there's also some innovations that should be happening with NFTs just on like the technology side that haven't quite happened yet, right? How do you make NFTs like easier to use and more flexible and have more logic, right? NFTs today are frankly like they're pretty pedestrian, right? But there are some new like EIP standards being put forward, and I guess like new ways of thinking about NFTs, right? Whether there's there's like 6551 is a new EIP being proposed that allows NFTs to essentially like control other assets, right? And so an NFT can own other NFTs, right? And that could be really interesting in like a gaming context, right? So your character NFT could own like a hat and a sword and whatever, right? And that can all be kind of transferred in a single bundle. And so rather than me sending like individual pieces of my character to you, if I'm selling, it's like I sell my entire character and the character set's items to you in one transaction, right? And so there's this concept of NFT bundling. But there's also stuff like, hey, an NFT can be used for DAO governance, right? If you hold this NFT, then you can actually participate and help govern a DAO based on on-chain smart contracts, right? Stuff like that is being built out, and that's super interesting because then that makes the NFT more powerful, right? It's not just kind of like this piece of artwork; it's almost like a key, right? And if you hold an NFT, you have the key to a DAO or a treasury or a set of smart contracts that can do stuff, and so. There are concepts right now being explored where like an NFT can own ERC20 tokens, right? And so let's say I have this NFT and it represents 100,000 USDC on the back end. If I send you this NFT, all of a sudden you also get control of the 100,000 USDC, right? That's a pretty interesting and novel use case that we haven't really seen play out yet. But once these things start playing out, like you can imagine the combinatorics and the permutations where NFTs can start doing all these cool things. And so I think those are some of the things that are super interesting as well. The user abstraction EIP 437 is like super interesting. That allows users to kind of do things like social recovery of wallets, right? Where time locks on their wallets, or smart contracts that can self-execute without requiring a user like poking it, right? And so these things get really interesting, right? It allows for gasless transactions or meta transactions where a developer or third party is paying gas on behalf of a user. And that makes the user experience much smoother and less intimidating. And so I think as all these things start getting maturity and start getting adoption, you're going to see that interacting with the blockchain is going to feel, not exactly like interacting with the Web2 app, but a little bit closer, right? You're not going to have as much complexity around having to memorize your seed phrases, and the wallet experiences are going to be better, and the things that you can do with your wallets are going to be more sophisticated. So that's all happening in the next couple of years, right? So I think it's going to be really, really exciting.
And it sounds like you have the most experience to lead the way here, being a product manager at YouTube at the early stages. So I'm going to look for you to solve all these problems that you mentioned.
It's definitely not just me. It's like a community-driven effort, right? And so one of the great things about crypto is like a lot of stuff is open source, and people release these building blocks, and then other people build on top of these building blocks. It's a bigger building blocks, and other people use that, right? So there's this concept of composability, and it's forking someone's code, which in a Web2 world might be seen as, oh, you're stealing someone's IP, right? Well, forking someone's code in Web3 is actually very much encouraged, right? It allows for people to build off of each other's work and to experiment faster. So I think that's where it all comes together, and it makes Web3 really, really powerful.
Definitely very powerful. I mean, we don't know a company without a Web3 division now, and you might have some insight because you have, probably connections to like YouTube. And I was shocked when Instagram pulled their kind of NFT initiative. I was super excited to, test that platform if they're going to launch it, because I just imagine how much the community would enjoy it. Like I would love to own a Steph Curry. I'm sorry, LeBron James. LA. I'm born in a bit. I would love to own a Steph Curry post. Maybe he's launching. He posts a post and there's only 500 of those. I would have loved to purchase one of those. Like I can't believe that they kind of pulled the plug early. And maybe they're not. They're just working behind the scenes, like you mentioned. Right? There's so much that they can do that you probably have insight on also.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's oftentimes with these larger tech companies. There's like multiple iterations, and sometimes they don't get it right? And sometimes it's easier for startups that are really in the weeds, that are talking to customers that are at the cutting edge, to do more, even if they have less resources, right? Less people, less money. but there's that like maniacal focus on the industry or the problem at hand. And so, companies like Meta or Alphabet, right? There are certain areas where they're not going to be as innovative, and then there's other areas where they're going to be, very dominant, right? Like,
Sure.
Apple and Google for the smartphone wars, right? Like, well, it's really hard for a startup to compete there because you need the network effects and the distribution channels and like the supply chain to build the hardware and also the expertise to build the operating system. And so it's like this very like vertical bundled thing. But in terms of the NFTs, because it's open, it's like, and there's like these set standards and like anyone can use them. I think some of the most interesting use cases are going to come from not the established tech players, but probably startups that are just starting now or that we've never even heard about. Hopefully, we at Origin can be one of those players in a couple of years where everyone knows about us at that point. But right now, we're still a startup, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, two last questions here for you. We know a couple of hot trends that came about. Just want your thoughts on it since you're in this space so deeply.
Yeah.
Bitcoin NFTs, BRC20, are they here to stay? Is it just kind of a flash in the pan? What's your thoughts on that?
So I think they're here to stay. Number one, I think that the Bitcoin blockchain is always going to be here, right? It was the first one. There's a lot of value on that chain, and there's a lot of like, old time BTC holders that want to see that chain be successful. And so I think like, this new innovation with like ordinals inscriptions and, BRC20 is innovative, right? And so I think it's here to stay. Current data shows that it's growing pretty quickly.
Yes.
So I would say I'm like cautiously bullish on it. That being said, I still think that, the lack of, kind of thinking about smart contracts and, building developer dApps from the outset means BTC is like a legacy chain, right? Like the way that ERC20 is created is like very hacky, right? It's very, very different than ERC20 on the Ethereum chain or, the other, whatever, right? Where it's actually well thought out and constructed from like the baseline foundation. And so I think Bitcoin stuff is here to stay. It's going to grow. But I think stuff that's on Ethereum or EVM compatible chains, there's going to be more innovation for NFTs there, right? They just have like a head start advantage in terms of like how to build smart contracts, how to upgrade smart contracts, how to create new standards that can tie in different smart contracts or whatever it may be, versus all the BTC stuff. It's like, oh, we got to hack it together, right? We have to find kind of like a way to like fit it into the way that the blockchain works, but there isn't this like well-developed infrastructure. So I think BTC stuff will stick around. It'll grow. Probably not a bad investment if you get in now early enough. But I think the future in terms of like where NFTs are really prevalent and touching, hundreds of millions of users' lives, it's probably going to be Ethereum and layer twos, and then maybe some alternate layer ones as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, definitely agree there, and appreciate your input there. Another hot topic that's, I'm sure every company now has an AI division of sorts. They have a Web3 and AI division. I'm sure everyone's just getting ran down to the wire thinking about these two things. So we know we don't yet know the implications of AI. I mean, I was just talking to my wife the other day that, hey, you got to be careful of your job. And she's a pharmacist. And I believe one day it will overtake, even a job like a pharmacist. So what's kind of, been, if there is a trend within the NFT or DeFi space, or if it's even too confusing? I see it really empowering, building metaverses and whatnot. But because what's kind of like your general thoughts on AI? Because we have two emerging technologies at a time where most people don't understand either of them.
I have quite a few thoughts here, right? So number one, I think AI is absolutely transformative, right? I've been playing around with it myself. I think most people have been playing with like the chatbots, right? ChatGPT, Google Bard. And even that is, solving, I think, a lot of daily problems, right? So I actually use ChatGPT to replace Stack Overflow, right? It's easier to like understand code, have interpret stuff, give you advice, or tell you how to like build something a certain way than it is to browse Stack Overflow, which is what I was using like 5 years ago, right? So that's an example, I think, where it's like super powerful. But also, if you think about it, what it's really doing is enhancing the ability of an engineer versus like, oh, it's outright replacing it to start, right? And then I've used other stuff too, where it takes it to the next level, right? There's a really cool AI project called AutoGPT that still uses the OpenAI API, but it's created these modules, and that thing can actually write code, right? And so I can give it a command and say, I want you to do this thing, and it'll start writing like different Python scripts, try to execute them, and then deliver an end product. It's still really buggy and basic, but I think over the next like year or so, it's going to iterate quite quickly, and then be quite useful, right? And so I do think that a lot of people that don't embrace the technology are at risk. Not just a pharmacist or like a copywriter, or but even like kind of like junior level engineers. But the people that learn how to embrace the technology actually become better at their jobs, right?
Yeah.
And so let's say you're like a lawyer, right? A lot of people are like, oh, lawyers are going to be like replaced. Well, like maybe like kind of like crappy lawyers, right? But like the lawyers that really understand what to do and like bring in AI to kind of like enhance their work, they're going to be able to do research faster, right? They're going to be able to understand the intricacies of the law faster, and they're going to be able to potentially use that to their advantage when they go, create agreements or deals, or when they go to trial, et cetera, right? And so I think it can be quite enhancing if used properly. In the world of, I think, like crypto plus NFTs, plus AI, that's going to be quite interesting. I'm not sure how it's going to play out. So two things I can talk about right away. So one thing that some people in the NFT community don't like is the fact that AI can now generate like art, movies, things like that are competing with like human creators, right? So I think there's like some serious discussion, debate that needs to happen there. I think it would be very sad if human artists are basically made obsolete. And so I think there needs to be some sort of thing that like develops where you can almost attest that this was created by a human versus an AI. On the other hand, I do think that like AI content generation is revolutionary, right? It's also very democratizing and empowering, right? So you can have someone that's like younger and inexperienced start playing with stuff and start being able to generate content that other people want to consume. It's almost like the YouTube movement, right? Like when YouTube came out, it allowed all these people with just like little cameras to become film producers, whereas 5 years prior you'd have to have professional people like filming for TV shows and movies and things like that. But this entire like industry of vlogs, right, and short form content, and now we see it in the form of like reels on Instagram and these TikTok shorts. Like that's only been possible because of these enabling technologies, right? And so I think that we'll see a bit of that divisiveness within the creator economy, just like it happened with YouTube, right? Traditional media was like, hey, this is evil. This is a way for UGC to like, steal our content or compete against us. But for the rest of the creator economy, it's actually a really great thing. And eventually traditional media embraced it as well, right? Everything is streaming now. And so I think this like AI thing is probably going to go through a similar journey where they're going to be like camps, right? People that embrace it versus people that like really look down on it. And I think the truth is somewhere in the middle again, right? I think that with all new transformative technologies, they oftentimes create new opportunities, but take other ones away. And it's us as kind of users of the technology, it's up to us to figure out like, hey, are we going to bring these into our lives and make the best of it? Because the technology is definitely going to be here, right? You can't take away AI now that it's being built, right? And it's just going to keep going. And so I would say like, creators, like figure out how to use it to your advantage, right? Don't lose your authentic sense of creating like from yourself, but like think about using it to like, perhaps enhance images or artwork, right? Or if you're a writer, use it to like do editing or be your kind of like idea generation thing for stuff, right? Like there's ways to like bring it into your system to still be authentic as a creator without saying, hey, like forget this AI thing, right? So I think that's one interesting theme at the confluence of AI and NFTs. Now, there's another, I think, like more controversial take, which I honestly haven't been able to wrap my head around yet, right? Which is like there are some like ethos differences between AI and crypto. If you kind of like map out how both of these technologies could be successful, right? So on the crypto side, it's all about being permissionless, about open source, around decentralization and distribution, basically like coordination of trustless actors. and not really kind of like hoarding data, right? On the AI side, it's all about hoarding data, right? Like you think about, crypto's complaints about advertising models in Web2. Well, AI is hoarding even more data, right? And in proprietary ways, at least to start, right? You have these big technology monoliths like Google and Microsoft in the space, and OpenAI is a startup. It's like, it's a 7-year startup that's like, doing really, really well. And it's no longer this like nonprofit, right? And so there are some ethos things here where like a few companies might end up being extremely, extremely powerful because they have the network effects of that data, and then they have users training that data, right? Because like a Google will have billions of users versus a new AI startup might have like 50 users, right? And so that's where Google has an advantage. And so I think that's one thing that we need to be conscious of and think about what's the best way that we as a society can adopt AI. Like, I would hate to see AI be really run by like 2 or 3 companies across the world, right? And that would make AI very powerful, but would also make those companies too powerful in my mind, right? But I haven't quite figured out like how do you actually have a more decentralized and open version of AI. So there are some companies working on like open source LLMs and other types of AI models. And so definitely hope that they have successful horses in the race. And I think there's also potentially possibilities of like the usage of AIs being a little bit more decentralized, right? Here's a crazy idea, right? No one has done this yet. I'm not saying anyone should do this, but in a few years, right, if there are literally like, millions of different AI agents, right, that people have customized or trained on different models or added specific feature sets to, those agents are almost in a way like distributed workers in the cloud, right? And maybe we end up having a marketplace where people can use these different agents, right? And actually, in that case, like cryptocurrencies and NFTs may actually be a great partner to AI. So think of a world where you have all these different like autonomous agents that you're supposed to pay for in an open marketplace. Well, what's the best way to pay for them? Well, digital payment rails, right? So crypto, right? So imagine that like we as users are, sending some USDC or some OGN token or, whatever some new AI token is to these agents as a way of paying for their services, right? Also imagine a world where these AI agents are interacting with each other and need to do value transfer, and they can actually use crypto rails to pay each other, right?
Wow.
So you may have like an AI agent that's like really good at research, and then another AI agent that's all about taking that research and like, producing, a video, right? So those AI agents may work in tandem, but need to like actually do value transfer across, right? And then another way to think about it is like, well, all these AI agents probably share some commonalities, but they also have specific parameters, right? Which GPT model are they using, or how did you configure it? What data sets did you put in? What are like other certain attributes that are kind of like related, but then non-fungible? Well, guess what? That could potentially tie into like NFTs, right? And so potentially you have a world where like having access to the NFT gives you access to the agent, right? And so I can see a world where me as a collector, not a collector of art, right, but a collector of apps and use cases in like 5 or 10 years, I'm like actually buying NFTs. And these NFTs are basically like my subscription passes to use these autonomous agents, similar to how right now I buy like a subscription to Spotify or I buy a subscription to Netflix, right? Well, maybe in the future, I'm collecting these NFTs that give me access to different tool sets. And so that's one kind of like really far field, long-term way I think that AI and crypto and NFTs could come together, despite some of the ethos challenges I mentioned earlier on here. So I'm excited to see if all that plays out. Who knows? I'm just kind of like trying to see into the future, but there's so many variables at play. I could be dead wrong about all this stuff, or maybe there's a silver lining of truth here where maybe we're onto something.
No, I think you're definitely onto something. And thank you for that comprehensive breakdown of, what it could be, because a lot of us are behind kind of like the 8 ball in this, and you are peeking behind the curtain more so than the average person. So I think that whatever far-fetched, applications for AI, I think they're going to happen, because I've asked many technology, tech people behind this in Silicon Valley, and a lot of people are working on the solutions that, that you mentioned. So we're going to bring it back to NFTs to wrap things up. I know that was the last question, but here's the last one. Any fun and interesting NFTs that you collect? And I'll go first. I love mine. I actually have Starbucks NFTs that
Mm,
have 30 days of free Starbucks.
yeah, that's awesome. True
And I
utility
also
right
have,
there.
yeah, absolutely. And I also have a Las Vegas restaurant NFT, free food for life. Shout
Yeah.
out to them, Chubby Catto, the Xpot and Venetian. So if you're ever there, so those are kind of like my two favorite NFTs today because I actually get use cases out of them. Do you collect or enjoy any NFTs?
Oh yeah, of course. A lot of my NFTs are more on the art or PFP side, obviously. So I've collected NFTs from some of the celebrities we've worked with, right? So I have like NFTs
Okay.
from Blau and Paris Hilton, right? And those are more like art, right? I also participate in the NFT communities that we're working with at Origin right now, right? So like I have a Pudgy
Hmm.
Penguin, right? We're not working with Yuga Labs directly, at least not yet, or Zuki, but those two are like two of the best projects. And, I have a bunch of NFTs there. I think what Yuga is doing with like, building these games, right? They're building like 4 or 5
Yeah.
games. It's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out the next year. And I did tell the guys at Roofstock when I'm ready to buy a house, we can do it as an NFT. And then I can have an NFT of the house. So still got to look there. So there's definitely a bit of that. And then I think what I would be really excited about going forward, I think, are some of these like new NFTs that will have utility, like you said, right? Like whether that's access to a restaurant or in real life experience. So I'm looking forward to the industry producing more of these, so that like NFTs are not just in my ledger, right? They're also things that I'm like using in the offline world. So yeah, excited about all that.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thank you for sharing so much with us. We got to have you back on because we talk more about what's happening than I feel Origin Protocol deserves a little bit more time in the future. But I'm definitely going to put all the links down below. I'm going to check you guys out because you are doing, innovative, pioneering stuff in the space. So I'm so excited to see that. And so for a way for people to connect to you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, and happy to come back and just riff about updates and new innovations. I'm sure like everything's going to look different in another 3 months and another 6 months, right? Like the space moves so fast, and especially when you're talking about like crypto and then these other adjacent industries, whether that's like AI or whatever it might be. I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that the rate of technology is going like exponential, right? And so it's hard to
Yes.
keep up, but it's really fun too.
Yeah, I've been saying it's dog years, but it's more like, double dog years, whatever it is, in a week with the onset of this new technology that's coming on. So yeah, we would love to have you back to talk all about that stuff. I
Yeah,
appreciate your time. We took more than, than we can for, so thank you so much.
yeah, it was a pleasure to be here. Thanks so
Awesome.
much.